Hello, house. Hello.
Hello. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Well, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed your break.
Thank you, ma.
Good. So, Mr. Babatunde Bangwe will be taking over from here. All right, Mr. Babs.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. If you are here, can you say good afternoon, unmute your mics and give me a loud good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, sirs and Mars. You're welcome to Module 2 as we look at developing decision-making skills. Okay, so my name is Babatunde Bangboye, and I'll be your guide for the next few minutes as we explore decision-making, as we look at some of the critical nuances about how to make effective decisions and what are those biases that we need to look out for, and what are some of the things that we need to also consider when we begin to assign roles to people that will become either recommend or become more accountable in driving the decision-making process. So I've had the privilege over the last 15 years of doing this for organization. One of my passions really is about transformation of organizations, and which includes looking at the culture and ensuring that the culture of an organization is not just what is stated, but it's what is experientially lived. And more importantly, how do we take stakeholder expectations and turn it into employee action? So that's been my journey. Quick ground rules for everyone. And just to remind us, I would like everyone to participate, everyone, so which includes unmute your mic when ready, and or use the chat box. I'd like everyone to participate. I'd like everyone to, one person speaks at a time. I also want you to be present, soul, mind, and body. You know, one of the things that has affected a lot of organizations today is the concept of presenteeism, which is your body is there, but your mind is not. So I want to avoid presenteeism. I want your body, your mind, and your soul to be part of our engagement. I also want us to be open to new ideas. And the formula for that is L is equal to P plus Q. L is equal to P plus Q. So learning is equal to programmed knowledge or your mental models or your mental maps, which impacts on your behavior. And Q, which speaks about taking informed decisions or qualitative decision, what I call quality insight. So those work. So L is equal to P plus Q. So P, program knowledge, P, qualitative insight. So I'm going to challenge your mental models, and we're also going to derive that from data and, of course, insights for as a result of our discussion. Also, I want us, whatever it is that we're sharing, whatever anybody has said, somebody has always remember it's a value chain. So be additive, just add value, not repetitive. And please, let's avoid all weapons of mass distraction, your phones. I know we're working from home, so happy holidays. But please avoid the weapons of mass distraction. I also want us to respect others' views. And I also want to commend that we're all being punctual. And remember, it is okay to disagree. So I say it like this. I say that it's okay to agree to disagree agreeably. Agreed? Or you put it in the chat box and write, I agree. So in the chat box, everybody write, I agree. So I say it again. I want us to agree to disagree agreeably. Agreed? So everybody in the chat box, everybody in the chat box, I want you all to write, I agree, I agree, I agree, I agree, I agree, I agree. I'm not seeing any responses in the chat box. Yes, I'm seeing yes. Thank you, Uguchi. Thank you. Yes, I agree. Okay. So while I'm waiting for everybody, that means we're not agreed though. So a few online ground rules. Please show your face if you can. Please mute your mic when you're not speaking. Please raise your hands when you have something to share. Please give me a feedback using the menu on the participants drop box. You would see where you can raise your hands. If I'm going too fast or going too slow, please indicate in the chat box. Please use the chat box to make your comments or ask your questions from everyone. Or if you need help, please direct all that to the host, which you can click on the chat box. If your network is unstable, please turn off your video if your video is on. And if you're disconnected, please don't panic, just simply reconnect. All right, thank you, Yinka. Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you for agreeing with me. All right, one thing I'd like us to do before we go along, if you look at my name, I've said my name is Babatunde Bangboye. You can see that I put something there by renaming myself. I said I am a global leader. So in the next 10 years, in terms of your life and career journey, where do you see yourself? So I'd like you to go to the participants box. You can go there, click on your name. When you click on your name, you can rename yourself. Okay, I see that the feature is disabled. All right, no problem, but it'd be good for us to know what you see yourself in the next 10 years. Okay, so you're all welcome to this session, Developing Decision Making Skills. Before I start, in the chat box, what are your expectations? So can I see in the chat box, what are your expectations? What are your expectations? What are your expectations? What are expectations from this model as we look at decision making? What are your expectations? What are the things you're thinking about? Please, can you put in the chat box? If you would like to unmute yourself, please feel free to unmute yourself. What are your expectations? Okay, I can see Morris. Welcome. Please, can you mute yourself? Thank you. So please, what are your expectations? Very quickly, can I see what your expectations are? Remember, I said everybody must participate. I'm not seeing everyone. I've only seen Ugochi. Thank you. I've seen Mrs. Adedayo, Yinka, Vanessa. Thank you very much. I'd like to see more people. What are your expectations? What are your expectations? Okay, Ugochi, so you have to mute your mic. Ugochi, what's on your mind? What are your expectations?
Sorry, it was a mistake.
Okay, no problem at all. Okay, what are your expectations? Everybody, what are your expectations? What are your expectations? Oh, Damola, thank you. You're raising up your hand. You can unmute your mic. And what are your expectations?
To be able to take a positive impact decision process.
So yes, positive impact decision. I like that. And why did you choose the word positive? Why was that the first word that came out in terms of your thinking? Why positive?
Yes, because in decision-making process, whatever decision you take has effect. Is either it turns out negative or
positive. Fantastic. So
that is why I use positive.
Fantastic. I like that. So taking positive impact, and I like the word use, impact decisions that enables the organization achieve set goals, objective, or strategic imperatives as you have considered all the risk factors, and within the context of your decision, you have factored in the mitigating element. Fantastic. Ugochi says to learn how to make better decisions. Fantastic. And that's a very good. Any other person? Vanessa, Yinka, Morris, still expecting from you. What are your expectations? What are your expectations? Whilst I'm expecting that, let's move on. So fastest fingers, quickly, fastest fingers. Oh, Morris, thank you. To possess effective decision-making, yes, I believe skills, a mindset, very important, very, very important. Thank you very much for that. So fastest fingers, I'd like us to look at this question, and I want you to answer. So 5 frogs were in a log, and one decided to jump off. How many were left? How many were left? Fastest fingers, fastest fingers. Fastest fingers, how many were left? Fastest fingers, fastest fingers. Look at my question. 5 frogs were in a log and one decided to jump off. How many were left? Ugochi, 5. Okay. All right. Thank you, Ugochi. Fantastic answer. The answer is 5. Why did you choose 5? Why?
Well, you did say whether they were left on the log or off the log, so they were all still within the same environment. So
fantastic, fantastic, fantastic. There's a difference between doing and actually deciding. And this is where we'll start our conversation. All right. So one of the folks was still deciding. So you can still stay in the realm of decision. All right. The item thought about gets done when it's implemented or executed. So the whole essence of the decision-making process is that when we have identified a problem and we have come up with a noticeable solution, obviously the intended outcome is to drive execution. So that's important. Thank you so much, Ugochi. So Ugochi, is your hands opened? So can you just put out your palms and just take virtual chocolate? So just take my virtual chocolate right now. So just take my virtual chocolate. And I'd like you to just taste the virtual chocolate. Mwah. Can you taste it? Yes, I feel you look like, yes, is it Mars bar? Is that a Mars bar you're taking right now?
Yeah. Something like that.
Something like that. Okay, well done. Well, so let's start our conversation quickly. All right, and I'll start with a quote from Bill Gates, and we're going to start our conversation around decision making. And one of the critical thoughts that I'll be throwing at you is that why do leaders make bad decisions? And I'd like you to listen to Bill Gates because this will serve as the foundation of quite a number of things. And I'd like to ask your opinion about this thought. And I'd like you to apply it to different aspects of your personal life, but more importantly, your business. So this is what Bill Gates said. This is 1995. It says, we always overestimate the change that will occur in the next 2 years and underestimate the change that will occur in the next 10. Don't let yourself be lured into inaction. Does this make sense to any of you? And what can you take out from this quote? We always overestimate the change that will occur in the next 2 years and underestimate the change that will occur in the next 10. Don't let yourself be lured into inaction. What does that mean to you? Any thoughts?
Okay, I think it speaks to short-sighted.
Oh, Vanessa, fantastic. It's good to hear from you. All right. Shoot.
I think it speaks to short-sightedness. People find it difficult to really project what to expect in longer tenors. But in shorter tenors, they tend to have a vision of what to expect, but sometimes they overestimate, probably out of fear or certain uncertainties in the now that they project into the next few years.
Yeah, so fantastic point. Fantastic point. Any other points? Any other thoughts? Any other thoughts? So there's a short-term thinking, there's a mid-term thinking, there's a long-term thinking. Either way, we need to take some level of action. We need to take some level of action. And I'd like you to think of these quotes as I'll begin to talk about exactly what has happened this year, noticeably for us in Africa, Nigeria, for March, in terms of what we have termed the new normal. But what I have quite called it the new now, because we're now post-COVID. Now we shouldn't be reacting, we should be responding. All right, so I would like us to think about this quote as we go along. So why do leaders make bad decisions? So in your own thoughts, can you put in the chat box why leaders make bad decisions? Why leaders make bad decisions? Why do leaders make bad decisions? Ugochi, you have unmuted yourself. Fantastic. I'm listening.
Okay, sorry. I think it was a mistake. I'm using my phone. But lack of foresight, yeah, that's
lack
one.
of foresight. I like that. So we make bad decisions because we lack foresight. What else again?
I think for
Thank you, Maurice. Good.
Yeah,
I'm listening to you, sir.
In most cases, especially in Nigeria in particular, for political reasons.
Yes, I know that in our lexicon, the word policy somersault, in Nigeria, we come up with different lexicon to define our reality. Policy somersault usually affects us. And that's why a lot of people do not make long-term projections simply because of our context. Fantastic. So there's a political context to this, policy somersaulting. All right, what else again? So why do leaders make bad decisions? Yinka, the innovator, you have unmuted yourself. Shoot.
I would look at poor perception or understanding of the problem. It often leads to bad decisions.
Fantastic. The perception of the problem may be the problem itself. Thank you. And that is what we have called biases. Now, can we think about this issue about perception? When we hear perception, what comes to your mind almost immediately? When you could just forget the language I'm going to use. So bad perception, what does that really mean contextually in your own business? What does that mean? What does that mean to you? Who would like to share? I like that word. Thank you, Yinka, for that poor perception of the problem. What does that mean? Perception, like different variants to that thought. Who can share? Any other person?
Let me just add. Can I just say something?
Oh, thank you, influencer.
Yes. So talking about perception, sometimes it's just looking at what is happening in one industry, something that has been happening over a period of time, and assuming that that's the way things are going to be, so that things will continue to be. And so when you're making decisions, you end up making your decision based on those things.
Fantastic. And I noticed that you said emotions and sentiments, and Vanessa said selfishness. Yes. So you're thinking of the immediate, you're not thinking of the bigger picture. That's Vanessa. Lack of vision and bad leadership skills. Fantastic, fantastic point. So I'd like us to look at my 5 boxes. So I'd like us to look at these 5 boxes. We have mentioned perception, policy, somersault. We mentioned lack of foresight. We've said emotions and sentiments. We've said selfishness. You understand, lack of vision and bad leadership skills. I'd like us to look at my 5 boxes. So I'm going to start off with some examples, all right, of Microsoft. And I'd like you to give me any other suggestions as we go along. Number two, I like to, if you look at my second box, is that the reason why leaders make bad decisions, and you will see that in those examples, is what Yinka said about perception, and has qualified perception as pattern recognition. Does that make sense to you? For instance, because you did something 5 years ago, right, and it worked, and this 5 years later or 10 years later, the same elements are there. The context may be different, but the same elements are there. Your response is to use the same model that you used 5 years ago to do it currently where you are. And when you think about pattern recognition or perception of what the problem is, it also impacts on what is referred to as emotional tagging. Because we have seen a recognizable, deductible, identifiable pattern, what comes up is this, is what Mrs. Adedayo said about systems 1, systems 2 thinking. Rather than become logical in our response, the natural thing we do is to become more automatic. Oh, I've done this before. I've seen this before. And it sort of works. And before you know what happens, we make a mistake. And we see that in a lot of organizations. You see that, that's what we're going to talk about. Another thing, the reason why leaders also make bad decisions is that sometimes we're not cognizant of the red flags. Quite a number of, when I talk about red flags, when I mention red flags, what comes to your mind? What comes to your mind? When I say red flags, what comes to your mind? When I mention red, remember I said we're discussing, I don't want to throw, so I want you to really say, when you have red flags, what comes to your mind? Mr. Babatunde,
danger.
Danger.
Yeah.
Yes, danger. It may be staring you at the face, yeah, right? It may be staring at the face, but your refusal to make an amend or address the situation may impact on your eventual decisions. Does that make sense to you, Mr. Babatunde? So the red flag may be in front of you, but because you're more consumed, because you say, oh, I've done this before, I have been here before, you just lose sight of some of the things that come. Does that make sense to anybody? If it makes sense, please in the chat box say yes. If it makes sense, please say yes. Thank you, Morris. And just like what Vanessa said, some of those red flags, sometimes because we are the ones directly involved, is issues of self-interest, right? Inappropriate self-interest, just like what Vanessa said about selfishness, distorting attachments. Certain things are not working, but because you have vested interest, you look for other ways by tweaking here and there to ensure that it works. We call it the sunk cost bias. The sunk cost, we're going to be going that. They're misleading memories, and I can give you examples. One of the examples that comes to mind is one time the MD of Quaker Oats, because they had bought Gatorade. For those of us who do exercise, Gatorade is that drink that a lot of sports people use, and it was a massive M&A, merger and acquisition. It was fantastic, and he saw that this was a good deal, and he went with that, and everybody applauded him. He was lauded as being one of the best MDs. A few years later, another smaller company that was into fruit juice called Snapple. I don't know if you have heard of Snapple before, S-A-S-N-A-P-P-L-A. So Snapple was another company of the same beverage mindset. He decides to buy it. You understand? Despite the fact that there were all red flags concerning this particular deal, eventually this was the worst deal that tarnished his emotions. That's what a misleading memory is, a misleading memory. And I can give you a lot of examples. I don't know how many of you have heard of, and can you give me examples of misleading memories before I go on? Misleading memories that because you did something 10 years ago, I'm talking of organizations in Nigeria that you can think about, whether in Nigeria, whether local or global, that you can remember that has led to what has happened now. Who can tell me? Any examples you can think about?
Well, I can say one about the political situation we have in Nigeria now. I know that several years ago, a lot of Nigerians made decisions to bring in Buhari because we thought what he did in 1983, surely he should be able to do again.
That's a good one. And again, another misleading memory in the same fashion is the response of the older generation with this generation as regards to the hashtag EndSARS. A lot of parents told their wards, their children, don't go, nothing good will come out of it. You understand? Because of what has happened in the past, of things that happened, we're talking about in the 90s, even in 2000, what has come out of any of those movements. But we've also forgotten that context is completely different and the availability of tools. Never in the history of Nigeria have we seen the kind of organized way. Think about one of the forefront organizers of this movement, the Feminist Coalition, for instance. They were able to raise nearly 150 million to push an agenda from feeding through healthcare to marshalling legal frameworks to address all the mishandling of a lot of people. It has never happened in any history to be able to pull out this kind. I mean, where in the history of a movement or a rally would you see a generation after they have done the campaigning, the picketing and all that, they would clean up the place? That's never happened. So misleading memories. Let's not belittle the question. The second bucket, if you look at it, is the reason why a lot of people make bad decisions is not understanding the signals. And we're going to talk about that. And when we look at the signals, I'm talking about those strategic inflection points. And when I talk about strategic inflection points, I'm talking about those 10 times changes that upend our basic assumptions. We talked about basic assumptions that a business model is built on. Those assumptions. The same Bill Gates saw the internet as a fad that will pass away. And because of that, they were not able to seize the opportunities the internet will bring. I'm going to show you a slide shortly. The same thing also happened to Nokia. All right. Then the fourth thing, again, a bucket that we're going to look at on why leaders make bad decisions is the psychological traps. And I'm going to ask you, how do we mitigate against these traps? Then the last one, we're going to look at agility, the way we need to respond. So we're going to look at these buckets, and this, what will drive this conversation would be our examples. So look at my first examples. In the 20th century, Microsoft had 95% of all operating systems. So all operating systems in terms of whether PCs, desktops, mini laptops, and all that, all ran Microsoft Windows, whether you call it Vista, whatever it is, but its operating system was on all decks of 95%. We're talking about the 20th century. And we're talking about the 20th century, we're talking about just about 10 years ago. But in the 21st century, Microsoft's mobile operating system share is just 1%. Just 1%. And this is what happens when we assume and when we consider a fad. And if you go back, let me go back to his statement. This is where I'm going to. It says we'll always overestimate the change that will occur in the next 2 years. So sometimes a change may occur in the immediate, and we can make a mistake thinking that this is long-term, i.e. remote work. If you agree with that statement. In the immediate, and we base our decisions or we take strategic directions because of a short-term fad. And just like what Yinka said about the perception of a problem, all right? This is very important. I just wanted to show you that slide. So look at all the things that Microsoft missed out. So on new media, they were totally out of it. Netflix is number one. On mobile, in terms of phone, and operate its operating system. Apple is number one. Microsoft missed out on it. In terms of search, if I was going to ask you, when you want to use a search, you want to search for something, do you use Microsoft Bing or Google? What do you use? What do you use?
Google. That's first choice.
His first choice. Google. So we all use Google. All right. So even Microsoft in that is not even there. Look at in terms of cloud. Amazon is number one on that. In terms of using cloud computing, it is just of recent that Microsoft seems to be gaining ground, and that's simply because they have changed their MD. The new MD in 2014, his name is Satya Nadella, and they are investing a lot on cloud, Azure. So Azure now is number two. But look at all the things that Microsoft missed, because sometimes they overestimated. So Bill Gates said, don't overestimate the immediate, but he also underestimated the immediate. So it's not about overestimating or underestimating. It is understanding the signals and what does that signal portend to your industry and to your organization. That influences the kind of decisions that you need to make. Think about Nokia. How many of you use 3310? If you use 3310 one time in your life, say I. Say I. So the I is happy. You can put it in the chat box. You can say yes or I. Now, I'd like you to look at this publication of Forbes in 2007. Nokia, 1 billion customers. Can anyone catch the cell phone king? This is 2007. By 2011, now I'm not talking about 10 years. By 2011, 49.4% share globally of all smartphone market was either Android or Apple. So the question is, where is Nokia today in terms of their phone? Think about it. The Nokia brand in terms of phone is not even owned by Nokia anymore. At some point, they sold it to Microsoft. Microsoft couldn't do anything about it. They sold it to Xiaomi in China. So the Nokia phones we see being sold is not even from Nokia anymore. So Nokia is playing catch up. Can I ask you a question? Why do you think Nokia failed to compete with brands like Samsung and the Apple phone? Why do you think they failed? Can I have any comment? Because this is very important, because part of decision making is strategic thinking.
I think they failed to take cognizance of the emerging technologies and the platforms on which mobile. Yeah.
Fantastic. Can you give me one word to qualify that you have said? Is the word signals. There are signals that are consistently coming at your industry. The ability for you to have a structured way of identifying and deducing those signals becomes important. And I saw that you did VUCA. And we saw that VUCA, who can remind me what VUCA is? Who can remember what VUCA is in terms of what is shaping our business environment as well as the socioeconomic environment? What does VUCA mean? VUCA, what's V in VUCA? Mr. Babatunde? So Babatunde?
Volatile.
Okay, yes, volatile. What about you? Fantastic. So there's volatility. What about you?
Uncertainty.
Yes, uncertainty. What about B? C?
C, complex.
Yes, so there's complexity, and the last one is what?
Ambiguous.
Yes, so there's an ambiguity. I'd like to add another letter, which is before VUCA, and that is the new one. It's called D-VUCA. D-VUCA. And do you know what D is? D is digital disrupt. Digital disrupt. So as we think about volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, I also want you to add that there's disruption because of digital. And that's what happened. So I want to ask you now, every one of you, please put in the chat box, what signals right now are disrupting your industry? What signals right now are disrupting your industry? Put that in the chat box for me. What signals right now are disrupting the industry? What signals right now are disrupting your industry? So please. What signals, Mr. Babatunde, can you please mute your mic, sir? So please, in the chat box, what signals right now are disrupting? So please tell me the signal at your industry. So Yinka, renewable energy, can you please tell me what your industry is? Renewable energy, fantastic. So we're seeing solar, we're seeing biodegradable, we're seeing quite a lot of things, fantastic. Renewable energy is disrupted. Yes, fossil fuels, fantastic. Yes, for those of us in learning, so we're seeing Zoom, yes, Microsoft Teams, yes, even a lot of collaborative tools, Google Classroom, and quite a lot. There are a lot right now. All right. Maurice, yes, exchange rate, that is a signal. Fantastic. But that is more at a macro. At a micro level, the signals affect you specifically. I mean, exchange rate is going to affect everyone. But for you, Maurice, your own industry, what's really in terms of those signals? Please, any other person? Damola, Ugochi, Vanessa, I'm waiting for you. Okay, whilst I'm waiting for you, another organization, how many of us remember, yes, research capacity, those are signals, yes. So, but specifically for your industry, if you're a not-for-profit, what are those signals? What are those signals that you feel is the possibility of disrupting what you're doing and impacting on your strategic goals and imperatives? Please, those signals. I want to think about this. Whilst we're doing that, I'd like us to note, again, look at another company in the mobile phone industry. Look at, how many of us remember BlackBerry? How many of us remember BlackBerry? If you remember BlackBerry, say, yes, I do. Right, yes. Yes, Vanessa, high inflation rate that is wiping out investors' return on investments. Yeah, so high inflation rate, so there's bad. But beyond that, what else again? Fantastic point, just like what Maurice said about the exchange rates. Yes, fantastic. So you all remember the BlackBerry, yes. And BlackBerry was #1. Everything was happening. But by 2011, all that changed. In fact, last year, BlackBerry, was it last year or early this year, BlackBerry officially has closed down. So before the parent company, their product was called BlackBerry, but the company was called Research in Motion. Research in Motion, when they were filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, they changed their name from RIM, Research in Motion, to BlackBerry, to their product name. But officially, I think 2020, early this year, they've officially stopped making BlackBerry. What happened? Because it failed to understand the signals. So listen to what Aim Webb, which is a futurist, and I like what she said. The ways in which RIM and Apple plan their futures are what sealed their fate. And what happened to RIM is a warning that applies to every organization, which means they refuse to understand the signals that was upending. Remember when I said that strategic inflection point is? Those 10 times changes that upend current assumptions on your business models. So senior leaders can choose to lean into uncertainty and find out a creative way or a method in tracking disruptive forces early, the D in VUCA, or they can choose to innovate narrowly and reinforce established practices and beliefs. Does this make sense to everybody? This quote. Does it make sense to you? Does it make sense to you? If it makes sense, please say yes. Fantastic. So fantastic. All right. So let's move along quickly. All right. And I want to look at those signals. Quickly, I want to look at those signals, and this signal speaks to us. So I want you to look at the center, and I want you to put your organization there. Can we all agree that digital is affecting every business, irrespective of what industry you find yourself? Do you agree to that statement? If you agree, say yes. Fantastic. So let's look. So if technology is at the heart, let's look at some of the factors or those signals that is impacting on our businesses. And if you are, look at everyone and we can debate. Number one, wealth distribution. So purchasing power parity of people in Nigeria. So Nigeria was upgraded to a poverty line of $2, but now we have gone back again to $1. That is, people are below the $1 mark. We're moved up to $2 at some point. Now we've gone down to $1, and because of quite a lot of things, like somebody rightfully said, we're a mono commodity nation. And if you remember what happened during the COVID, it has never happened. Nobody could preempt or even speak to it. We all remember or predict or project that the oil price went below zero. There was a negative valuation. So education is an important point. Infrastructure, especially for those of us who rely heavily on supply chain. Government in terms of policies, geopolitics, and that you can see what's happened in the Northeast. You can see what happened just for the last 1 or 2 weeks about the unrest in different parts of the nation. So we have banditry in Kaduna. We have what's going on in the Northeast. We have issues happening down in the Southwest. Things happening in the South side. So geopolitics impacts. The contraction of the economy. Inflation is in double digits and it's rising. Public health. People do not even have access to primary health care. Demographics. We're having younger people, right? And we're having older people who are getting older. So Nigeria has moved from 45 to about 65 years old as mortality rate because of the advancements in technology, and people are becoming more fit famished. All right, the environment itself, media and telecommunication. Does all this make sense to us? Does it all make sense to us? All right, does it make sense to us? Okay, if it does, it's important for us to begin to think through these things. And now, I want to look at all the things in terms of harnessing these signals to ensure that we're able to make right decisions. One of the things that you need to think about is we need to determine those right questions. Like Yinka said, it's important that we challenge our perception of what the problem is. And we're going to look at a lot of things, so just permit me. We talk about even reframing those questions. Remember, we did the exercise about COVID, and some of us chose A and chose B in terms of the questions. The exercise is about framing the questions. How are we framing the questions that elicit the kind of responses, especially as it regards to innovation and creativity? We need to listen to those weak signals. They're not yet strong, but they are weak. They are coming subtly and suddenly. That's why I asked, what are those signals coming in your industry? We need to begin to uncover patterns. We're going to look at all these things carefully. Then we begin to ask questions. Then we determine the way we respond. And that's where I look at agility. Then we need to create the kind of scenarios and cause of action. I'd like you to think about all these things as we begin to answer those questions. All right, so let's move along very quickly. Now, group discussion. So remember, one of the things for us is to determine those questions. All right, to determine those questions. So I'd like us to look at this chart, and this is where I really want us to take. So I want us to look at those behavioral changes for this next normal. All right, so what's your take and why? So I'd like you to look at this 2x2 matrix that has been put on a gradient. And I'd like you to look at the y-axis, that is user growth since this crisis, and the intent to continue. On the y-axis, intent to continue use after crisis. So I'd like you to look here. When you look here, give me a minute. All right. So I'd like us to look here. Okay. So look at this box. It says return to old normal. All right. So if you look at it, it is low on both sides of the gradient. That is, there's some certain businesses that irrespective of whether pre or post-COVID, they would naturally move back to old normal. Whether we're using it now or not using it now, whether you've pivoted or not pivoted, there are things that are normal. Can you identify some of those businesses? I wrote one here about the restaurant business. People will still go out and eat. Do you agree to that statement? Do you agree?
Yes.
Yes, people will still go back to eat. People still go back. So if you have a restaurant business, yes. So during the COVID era, during COVID, when there was lockdown, you were supplying food. So you got a bike and people were delivering food, to different people. So if you were in Domino's, for instance, you just call, you make your order, and they will deliver the pizza to you. So the restaurant business was fine. But even post-COVID, it's still going to be the same. So that's how you need to think. This is what kind of behaviors would elicit your kind of response to what strategy or how you decide. This is the framework that would guide us. So return to normal. I'd like us to look at this one. The next one is potential to stick. I'd like you to think on the kind of businesses that you think that would naturally go back to old normal. Look at businesses that have the potential to stick. So if you can look at it, user growth right now, it's growing moderately, but after the crisis, it's going to increase exponentially. Wellness apps. So for instance, it's ironic that I downloaded an app. It's called the Ab Maker. And fantastic 30-day challenge it gives you, and it measures your BMI and all that. I don't know about you, it was a fantastic thing. I wasn't consistent, I admit. All right, but it was a good app that irrespective of whether pre-COVID or post-COVID or wherever COVID is, the point is that it has a potential to stick. I want to ask you, what kind of business do you think about has a potential to stick? What kind of actions, whether you want to do certain things or implement a certain strategic imperative, does it have a potential to stick? Let's look at this other one here. Exciting for now. Video conferencing, i.e. Zoom. How many of us remember that Zoom, the Chinese guy, became a billionaire almost overnight? He became a billionaire almost overnight because Zoom now became the tool that everybody uses. The question you should ask yourself right now is that it's exciting now, but is that going to be what's going to be protracted for long? Is that going to be very important? So is this a decision that we must make now to begin to say everybody start remote work? Is that decision in our purview, considering the fact that the customer is a determinant, or our stakeholders are determinants for the way we conduct our business? Then the last one is fast accelerator. That the growth will consistently increase during the crisis and after the crisis, which is telemedicine, which is using the internet in far-flung areas to help people to deal with certain issues. So I want you to look at these 4 boxes. Does it make sense to you? Does it make sense to you? In each of these 4 boxes, I'd like you to think about your business. All right? What are the things that will naturally go back to normal, irrespective of what has happened exponentially in terms of how digitization has been integrated in all that we do? What are the things that do you consider has the potential to stick, especially if you need to pivot? For instance, everybody was making face masks. Is it exciting for now? Does it have potential to stick? What is the way forward? Exciting for now. There's some good initiatives that people were doing during the COVID, during the lockdown, because it was enabling us to stay afloat, at least to pay certain bills. But now that there's a little bit of ease, Do you think that this is the way forward? The fast accelerator, that irrespective of COVID, it has come to stay. So, any thoughts quickly? I need your thoughts. I want us to think about it and think about your business. Any thoughts? Any thoughts? Remember, I said any thoughts? You can please unmute your mics. Yinka, the innovator, Vanessa, Ugochi, Morris, Damola. Any thoughts? Yinka, the innovator.
Yes, we just need to recognize our business model and recognize the times to see what we should put in more effort on.
Okay. So for you, your own industry. So for your own industry, what do you think has the potential to stick? Or what do you consider a fast accelerator? What do you consider exciting for that? Okay, well, we tried it. It's bringing in some more money, but this is not where we're going to stay.
Well, our industry is a matured one. It will always return back to the old normal as far as the crisis, once the crisis is over and more people go out and you keep using the products, that's the fuel. But over the long term, as I said earlier on, the renewable energy technology is a threat. Is a threat to that over the long term. Okay. But for the short term, definitely people will always
So for back. You, your business is return to old normal. Fantastic. Yes. So now for you you should be thinking about what could be a fast accelerator and has the potential to stick. Do you not get what I'm saying? So already you can say that, and we're going to look at another slide that will give us further details. Okay, so we've noticed that you have said to us that these are the signals. Fossil fuel renewable energy has the potential to stick. As more people become more aware and technologies begin to drive down the cost of some of these like solar panels and all that, it can become a potential fast accelerator because people begin to look for alternative sources of energy. Am I making sense?
Yes, precisely.
Precisely. So you now to ask yourself now, so this is where you are going to put your boxes. Thank you so much, Yinka. Damola, please, you unmuted your mic previously. Sorry. Please, I'd like to hear from you, please.
Yes, okay. For the return to old normal, for our own business, we actually fall into the old 4 categories because we're into healthcare.
Oh, fantastic.
So we fall into the 4, like for return to old to normal, just like the restaurant
business
delivery, going back to people going in for then hotels going in for hospitality.
Yeah, fantastic.
Going in for hospitality, they will still go back, into the hotels, even though for the past 3 months and not of 5-6 months they've lost. So for our own business into medical, return to normal deals with the part of our logistics because there is no e-logistics when you are moving medical equipment from Lagos to Maiduguri. There's nothing. It still has to go either by air or by road. So it's going to still, there may be delay, but it's still going to go back to the normal way of us doing our logistics movement and things. Then the fast accelerator is the telemedicine, which a lot of people knocked onto. Why this? Because people didn't want to go into the hospital physically.
Yes.
So everybody became a personal physician to themselves.
Fantastic.
Google, you are a pharmacist, you Google your medication, Google your symptoms, you analyze what is wrong with you, and you take it for there. Then the exciting for now.
So Damola, fantastic because of your industry. So this fast accelerator, what would be your response? So you're into the healthcare. So you're into are you a supplier of drugs? Do you make drugs?
We do both medical equipment and we do supply. Basically, we do procurement.
or procurement. So for you, a fast accelerator would be people going online to check on, okay, usability. So even the days of even looking at looking for user manual, they may just log on to your site and they see a step. Fantastic. So it becomes a fast accelerator. Fantastic. But please go along. Go on, please.
So that, so which make it what is it called, easier, and reduce the physical contact or calls for them to be able to say, oh, even it's so critical that even people that were asthmatic started using nebulizer at home themselves, as you said, and do a YouTube video of how the machine is being used. So it is only the life-threatening machines that people couldn't, apply at homes to use, which demand them going into the hospital.
So for you, you can actually situate that you're returning back to old normal. So for you now, in terms of you even deciding is how do we ensure that we expand our market? And I'm going to show you something now. And you're looking at other things that are becoming fast accelerator because people are becoming more aware. Access to the internet is becoming cheaper. And with the advent of 5G, which is going to considerably increase speed, what does that portend for you? So this is fantastic. Any other thought? Thank you so much, Damola. Olayemi, your mic is unmuted. Is Olayemi Galaxy? Any other point?
Sorry, before you go to the next slide, I want to suggest that everybody in class should actually look at this particular slide. And after the class, you should be able to write at least 3 to 4 things that belong to each box for your organization, for your industry. And so when you come to class tomorrow, you'll be talking to us about it. So I suspect that some people are not talking right now because they are probably not, they have not been able to think through. In this class, we have people from the investment world, we have people from the real estate, we have people from the oil and gas, we have from laundry. So tomorrow, we have from health care. So tomorrow, please, every one of you should come to class with 3 thoughts on each of those boxes. So it means that for each one of you, you must have 12. Return to old normal, potential to stick, fast accelerator, exciting for now, so that you will know how to use these things when you get back to your desk. If you don't practice it, if you don't go into analysis as we have agreed with ourselves this morning, you may just listen to these things and just throw it under the table, which will not be good enough. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Adedayo. I really appreciate that. Let's take this conversation quickly deeper. All right, so I want you to still think about this but you already have the slide, but let's take it deeper. I'd like you to look at this slide, which just sort of expounds on that particular 2x2 matrix. And I'd like you to look at this. Again, we have a 2x2 matrix, but what we see here is that we see quite a number of industries in different boxes, but the conversation is a bit different. So you can see on the y-axis, you can see predictability. So which portends how predictable is your industry in terms of the shifts, in terms of disruption, in terms of the signals that are coming. Then how malleable in terms of how can you shape your industry by shaping and tweaking your strategy. All right, so I'd like you to look at this particular 2x2 matrix, and you would see on each edge, you will see different approaches to not just strategy. So this is not a strategy class, but it's just for you to begin to think about the kind of decisions we must make by determining the kind of question. So I'd like you to look, for instance, so we have about 5, but you will see 4. I will show you the 5th one shortly that speaks to what is happening now. So I'd like you to look at on your bottom, you will see classic. So classic, that is a classic approach to decision making and strategy formulation. You see classic, which is, that is the box that you see here, the quadrant that you see here. Is classic, that if your industry is predictable, but you can't change it. And just like what Yinka said, so you're in fossil fuel, you're in oil and gas, really, it's predictable. You know, yes, you do understand that fossil fuel, alternative sources of energy is going to disrupt your business, but in terms of where you are right now, it is classical. I'd like you to look at the business. Can you all see my slides? If you can see my slides, please say yes. I notice
it's
that
not.
it's a bit, it's blurry. It's blurry. Wow. Wow. It just went blurry all of a sudden. Wow. I can see it on my other screen. Okay. But it will get clearer, I know, because I've changed my internet source to the next one, but it's still showing. Let me turn it back. All right. Let me go along. If you have your slides in front of you, no problem. But I'll just mention one or two things. So if you look at this box where my arrow is, you can see what you can see here is that a classic industry that is both predictable but not malleable. So it's a predictable, you can see the positive sign here is on the high. Our industries like IT services, distributors like we talked about, oil and gas like we talked about, the automobile industry, like tobacco, paper and forestry, household products, freight, logistics, beverages. Those are classicals. There's nothing you're going to do. All you're just going to do is you're going to compete more on product and innovation around that. I'd like you to look at the next quadrant. All right, you can see it on your slide. It will get clearer now. Again, this is adaptive. If your industry is unpredictable, you can't change it. And what you can see here, you can see transportation and infrastructure. You can see biotechnology. All you need to do in this industry is to change. So you cannot, you work in an uncertain industry, but in terms of your responses, you need to change. So predictability, you can see is very low, it's negative. You can't predict, it's uncertain. Your response is to change, is to adapt because of the advent of technology, the advent of new innovative products. Now, for those of us in real estate, let me show you, those of us in real estate, think about this. For those of us in real estate, this is where your industry is. You can see it here. Sorry, let me. For those of us in real estate, this is zero. If you can see my annotation, you can see that you're in between adaptive and shaping, which means that you are still in you're on an unpredictable industry because the prices of housing can go down, and the other externalities, the economy, the purchasing power parity, geopolitics, all those other signals that we talked about. But you also have the capacity to shape. If your industry is unpredictable, but you can change it. You can change it. You can change along the lines of pricing. You can change along the lines of looking for affordable housing by coming up with materials that are cheaper but more durable. All right. Now, if you look at in the third quadrant, which is shaping, there's quite a lot of other industries. You're seeing auto components, wireless technology, professional services. This is where you have consulting firms. So if your industry is unpredictable, but you can change it. So you can see shaping. It is still not predictable. You are working in a certain industry, but you can shape it along those lines. Then the last quadrant, which is visionary. If your industry is predictable and you can change it, this is where there is a convergence between predictability and you can shape it. This is where you have healthcare. And this is where Damola's industry is. Your visionary, healthcare. You have gas utilities, you have food products, you have insurance is here. Because you can shape your industry along the lines of pricing. You can see healthcare, equipment, and supplies. Now, looking at these 4 parts is important. Now, the reason why I'm saying that is that once you take this assignment and you think about it, I want you to look at this strategy, the one that you can employ. But in reality, excuse me, the reality is that even though you could be classical, your role here is to be big. Even though your industry falls in adaptive, your role is to be fast. Even though you fall into shaping, your role is that you can change the story by becoming top of mind. Even though you fall in visionary, you can be first. The truth about the matter is that we are all operating in a harsh environment. And the critical question for us is to even challenge these 4 assumptions. And that is, how can we thrive or be viable in this harsh industry, harsh environment? These are the kind of questions that I want you to start to think about as we make decisions. And for us to make this kind of decision, the question we should ask ourselves is this: are we an agile organization? So now I'd like each and every one of us to look at this screen. This is interesting today. This is very interesting. I'm asking the question, how agile is your organization? And I want you to be very forthright. So I want to ask now, again, a 2x2 matrix. I want you to think about this. Is your organization a startup? So tick the boxes that applies to you. So just do a mental tick and write the score. Do you feel that your organization is trapped? Do you feel your organization is bureaucratic? Do you feel your organization is agile? So the one that has the highest score in any of the boxes is where you are predominantly, not necessarily. Obviously, you can have all the other boxes, but I'm asking that, are you an agile organization? So I'd like you to do that right now and tell me your score for each of the boxes. Can we do that? Any thoughts? Is my slide still blurry?
Yes, it is.
Okay,
You try to.
I've been okay. You know what I'll do? Let me stop sharing. Mrs. Adedayo, can you please share your slide on this part, please, so they can see? I'll go back to my slide.
Okay, let me try to share.
Yes, just please share. That's the joys of our new normal. For some reason, I'm actually using 3 connections from Airtel, MTN, and SpectraNet. For some reason, they've decided to go on leave. But my Airtel is.
I'm trying to locate that. Sorry. I'll try to go there. Is it better now?
Yes, it is. It's a lot better. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so should I move it to the next slide?
Yes, move it to the next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide. All right. Can you see it now?
Yes. Better now.
Okay, so I want all of us to look at these 4 boxes and I will define it. Now, forget the Y and X for now. I just like you to look at these 4 boxes and tick the ones that best describes your organization now. And I want you to really be open about it, that best describes your organization now. That best describes your organization now. That best describes your organization now. So tick it and let me see your scores. All right. Okay, Vanessa says we are agile. Maurice says agile. Okay. What did you score on the other ones? I would like to know, what did you score on the other boxes? Maurice says agile. And I ask you why. Can you please put in the chat box, why did you choose agile? Why do you say you are agile? Why do you say you're agile? Okay, Vanessa, fantastic. I chose that because it best describes my organization. Okay, so which of those points best? So I know you ticked a lot. You ticked a lot of those things. Fantastic, fantastic. All right. Please signal with your hand if you need. Okay. All right. Who else again? Thank you, Vanessa, for that. So Vanessa, whilst we wait for other people, the other boxes, did you pick anything from the other boxes? So what was your second highest score? If Agile was your first highest score, what was your second highest score? Vanessa, you can unmute your mic. You have unmuted your mic.
Okay, I actually didn't start ticking them, but I looked through.
Oh, so you just picked Agile.
Yeah, I looked through all of those. Yes, because looking at startup, we're not startup, we're not chaotic. Oh well, we are creative. So
yes.
We're not ad hoc, not free for all, and a number of them don't apply to us.
Okay, what about trapped?
Looking at trapped, we are not uncoordinated. We are not stuck. Well, we are trying to build an empire. Fighting fires, it won't describe us. We're not under attack. We are not rigid. We're more flexible than rigid. They're looking at bureaucracy. We are not risk averse. We are risk takers in my organization. Oh yeah, we are efficient. We try to be.
What industry is your organization?
We are investment bankers.
Ah, no wonder.
I would have gone for maybe bureaucracy is not, it doesn't describe us at all.
Okay, so your highest score, the point is that your highest score comes from Agile.
Agile, I didn't start ticking one after the other. I looked through each of them and saw that.
Yes, I wanted you to look at the points. Yes, because I wanted you to look at those points because they are points that speaks to how do we function and operate. Because when we hear the word Agile, we talk about Agile, but by the time we begin to ask ourselves, where does decision rights stay? Now we're going into the meat. We're going to move quickly now. Where does decision rights flow? What's transparency in terms of decision? In terms of information flow, how transparent and how quickly does information go in terms of clarity? Are people allowed to fail? How nimble are we when we need to pivot? Or how do we segue effectively? And how are the people in terms of the responses to decision making? And this is one of the things we're going to talk about. Maurice says, okay, so Maurice, yes, so you're into medical supply. All right, so that's why you're adding. In terms of, so for you, Agile is your responsiveness to customer inquiry, to customer needs. So you're Agile in terms of response. Right? So your turnaround time obviously is quick. Does that make sense to you, Maurice? In terms of your transaction time. So somebody makes an order now, maybe depending on its location, I don't know, your helpline, your contact center is top notch. If a client has an issue with a particular medical, one of your equipments, if it calls your contact center, the way they respond, they're knowledgeable, there's quick response. If there is a problem in terms of your staff, in terms of your technical team, are able to respond by fixing, whether through the phone or physically going to that place. If it's, I'm referring to the large equipment.
Yeah.
Okay.
The Agile, the Agile fully defines us. It fully defines who we are.
Okay. All right. Okay, fantastic point. All right. So can we go on now to the next slide? Before we go to the next slide, so look at what Rita said. And it says something. It says that high-performing companies were both extremely stable. So when we talk about Agile, we're talking about there is stability, there is the following things, there is processes are intact and clear, there is a structure, there is sort of a backbone, a stable backbone, there is a strong governance framework that enables people to know what to do at every single point in time. And in terms of decision making and information flow, there is clarity on both ends. But there's strong dynamism in terms of responding to client briefs. There is no hierarchy of information. Those are the kind of things that an agile organization is. There's a lot of cross-pollination of pluralization and pollination of ideas. There's collaboration, there's co-creation, there's cooperation in driving organizational intent. That is the hallmark of an agile organization. So it is stable in terms of what defines the organization, but in terms of its response to its market, these things I just mentioned are important. Now, I'd like us to look at this trap. So we're giving a background on from signals to the underpinning frameworks that can impact our decisions. And the question is, what are those traps? And we're going to see a lot of thoughts. Now, I want to look at these different buckets. So there are 8 thoughts. More than that, I'm going to define them. I'm going to now ask you, how do we mitigate against these traps or biases? So the first one is referred to as anchoring traps. And what an anchor is that you base your current decision is based on a past event. And that is an anchor. So you see a particular situation and your response is, oh, because I did XYZ 5 years ago, that means that I can bring this to bear. And not knowing that the context is completely different. That is anchoring trap, or also a bias. And this again is another systems one thinking, whereby our response is not deeply logical or rational, but it's always based on emotions, emotional target, or based on experiences. The second trap or bias is what is referred to as status quo trap. Status quo trap. And that has happened to a lot of organizations, from Nokia, status quo, from Nokia to RIM. Let's come down to local industries. Think about 1990, 1991, where new banking licenses were given. Smaller banks like the Guarantee Trust Bank, the Zenith Banks, the Standard Trust Banks, and the likes came on board. They were smaller compared to the Wema Bank, the IBWA, the Union Banks, the First Banks of this world. They came up with a new value proposition. Many of these banks, the older banks, never pivoted. Many of them never pivoted. And you know what happened? This status quo. The status quo is that most people are not willing to make decisions, because when there are a lot of alternatives and the risk factor seems to increase, what usually happens is that the best and safest choice is just to stay with what we know. Does that make sense to any of us? How many of us remember the book by Spencer Johnson called Who Moved My Cheese? Of the 4 characters, Hem and Haw, the human character, and Sniff and Scurry, the mice character, the animal characters. You understand? When the cheese had finished in Station C, remember the story. How many of us remember the story? If you remember the story, please say yes. If you remember the story. If you remember the story. How many of us remember the story? How many of you have read the book Who Moved My Cheese? Yeah, fantastic. So if you remember status quo, so you notice that the animal components of this story refuse to move forward simply because, you know what happened? Because they were used to certain way of thinking, all right? And because perceivably, they were more certain than the uncertainty of going through the maze. So there's a start. So remember, the anchoring trap speaks about judging current events with past events. Status quo speaks about the multiplicity of options, but the best route is to go with ones that the risk is low. So you're not risk takers, but you're risk averse. Then the sunk cost trap, and this is a deep cultural thought for a lot of organizations. The sunk cost trap is that you have started a project, and especially for investment bankers. So there's this particular deal, there's a project, okay, and there's a lot of investment. In fact, a better example would be banks. So you give a loan to a bank, so you lend some money to a bank, to an organization, because you perceivably thought there was a potential, but you have not done your due diligence, and you have not gone through all the 19 C's or how many C's of credit, and you decide to follow through simply because of certain whatever. And this particular organization is defaulting and defaulting and defaulting. Now, to justify, that's what the sunken cost trap, to justify your decision, you keep pumping more money into this particular organization with the advent or thinking or your assumption, and we have said assumption is the worst form of knowledge. You assume that down the road, this particular organization would make a turn for the better. So this is, and we have seen that in a lot of organizations. I don't even want to go into it. To a lot of organizations who they bought a particular business, an M&A, and they kept sinking until eventually they had to allow that to unbundle that company. That's exactly what happened to Microsoft when they bought Nokia. Eventually, they discovered they didn't have the capabilities to manage it. They eventually unbundled it. Then, conforming evidence trap. And this is where everybody, and this is why a lot of leaders make decisions. So you want to make a decision on buying a company, for instance, or you want to make a decision concerning a particular product or certain things that you want to do in a business. And rather than becoming more rational in addressing this peculiarity, what you do is that you call another organization that is of the same similitude of your business, and you begin to ask if maybe the director or the MD or somebody that you know there, and you begin to ask questions, and the person begins to tell you what you want to hear. Essentially, confirming evidence simply means that you're looking for data that speaks to what you want to hear or what you want to see. So you're not rational, but you are moving towards your deep emotions or things that agree with your own belief system. The first one is framing trap. And the framing trap is what happened with the exercise about COVID, about whether 2000 or 1000, whether A or B. And I have something also similar. The point is how can we change a question? How can we change a question? So for instance, let me do something very mild. You tell somebody that you are just a perpetual latecomer, and you reframe the question, why do you come late? Now, both of them allude to certain things, what we can see in terms of the emphasis. The emphasis is that you're coming late. But in these two questions or two responses, I'm emphasizing one thing, and in the second question, I'm emphasizing the other thing. So if I say you're just a perpetual latecomer, what I'm emphasizing is not the behavior. I'm affecting your personality. So I've just labeled you. You are a latecomer. But when I say that, why do you come late? I change the question. I'm addressing the behavior, not the personality. Does that make sense? So framing is, how do we ask the right question? Does that make sense to every one of us? Does that make sense to all of us? Please, I need your responses. Yes. So look at all this. These are biases. So we have anchoring, we have status quo. These are things that we do, but we're defining it. All right. And if you look at status quo, is pattern recognition, for instance. All right. Sunk cost trap is what you would naturally refer to what Vanessa said about selfishness, inappropriate self-interest or vested interest. Thank you, Gochi. All right. Confirming evidence is just telling ourselves that we're looking for data that supports our argument. Framing is, how is the question posited? What are we emphasizing? You'll be asking the same question, but the emphasis are completely different. Estimating and forecasting trap is also similar in some ways to confirming evidence, in fact, to all of them. So estimating is that you come up with, so if I ask you just like anchoring, I tell you, we do that by saying, how many people are living in Lagos State? How many people are living in Lagos State? And I give you a figure and I say 50 million people are living, I'm just giving an example, 50 million in Lagos State. And I said, if 50 million people are living in Lagos State, how many people are living in Oshodi? Now, what do you try to do? Who can tell me? So we have 50 million people living in Lagos State, but we have, so how many people are living in Oshodi? So I've given you something that serves as an anchor. Okay, 50 million. Okay, it might not be true, but I just give you a random figure, 50 million. What would you try to do now? What do you think you'll be doing? Any thoughts? Sorry?
We try to estimate.
We try to estimate. So what we do is that we look at that 50 million and we begin to start to think. So our judgment is looking at data. You're looking at experiences, your emotion. Okay, in Oshodi, I went to Oshodi right now. Okay, how many people are in Oshodi? Oshodi is a very large, there's a densely populated environment. Okay, there are 50 million. Okay, give and take 20 million. Even though the data is not accurate, we now begin to estimate. Then we begin to forecast and now add another variable. And I say to you that in the next 10 years, what will be the population of Oshodi? If Lagos State increases to 300 million, you now begin to get without data. All right. So if you look at estimating, there's a lot of uncertainty in terms of your decision making. All right. Now, investment bankers, again, this is where they fall into all the time. Because your predictions about certain stocks and the valuation of a company is based on a lot of parameters. But again, all these are all guesswork because even though you have a method, you have tools that you use in helping you to forecast, always remember that there are also human elements that you cannot predict. There's a lot of uncertainties. So let me give you a good example. How many of us would have believed that COVID-19 would have shut down the entire economy? If they had told you that we were going to shut down the Nigerian economy for a period of nearly 3 months, would you have believed it?
No.
So there's no amount of forecasting that can prepare you for this kind of reality. No, so even though we have the tools and all that, so there's a lot of uncertainty. The question, how do we mitigate against this? Then the other two, overconfidence trap and prudency trap, speaks again. This also speaks to this level of uncertainty. So we think about overconfidence trap. It will only mean that, okay, you have always gained consistent results. The same thing happened to companies like Microsoft for such a long time. We're talking about from 1983-85 all the way down to the 1990s. They were the dominant force. We're talking about 95%.
Okay, just a minute.
Please. Well, we should go on a slight breather very soon. I wanted us to
I've given you control.
it's not moving.
Maybe
It's moving now. It's moving.
Okay. Mr. Let me. I can't seem. It's not.
so you can go ahead. Maybe
Sorry.
No, don't worry. No worry. It's important that I even answer this question so that it gives you the context. Okay, please, can we go back? Let's go back. I want to show you, I have it on my slide. I want to show you an exercise, the same exercise that you did. I want to show you the framing of the question. And let me see.
Do you want me to control it from here?
No, I want you to stop sharing. I want to share my slide.
Okay. All right. You can share now.
Okay. I think it's better now, is it not? Okay, can you see, Vanessa, can you see this question?
Yes.
Vanessa, can you see this question?
I can see the slide, even though it's not very, but I can see.
Okay, so this is an example of for insurance. So you're a maritime property, you are a marine property adjuster charged with minimizing the loss of a cargo on 3 insured barges that sank yesterday off the coast of Alaska. Each barge holds $200,000 worth of cargo, which will be lost if not salvaged within 72 hours. The owner of a local marine salvage company gives you 2 options, both of which will cost the same. Now look at this. Plan A. This plan will save the cargo of one of the 3 barges worth $200,000. Plan B. This plan has 1/3 probability of saving the cargo on all 3 barges worth $600,000, but has 2/3 probability of saving nothing. Plan C. This plan will result in the loss of 2 of the 3 cargoes worth $400,000. This plan has 2/3 probability of resulting in the loss of all 3 cargoes and the entire $600,000, but has 1/3 probability of losing no cargo. Now, I want to look at these questions. Now, are they all different?
No.
Hello? Vanessa and everybody, I want you to look at it. Are they all different?
You mean the plans?
Yes, look at the plans. Plan A, Plan B, Plan C, Plan D. Are they all different?
Yes, they are. By my own thinking.
By your thinking, see, that's where the challenge is. When we are asking questions, especially when we have identified a problem, the way we ask the question matters the most. The way we frame our plans matter the most. If you look at it, they're all saying the same thing, but there's just more details in one than the other. So the plan will save the cargo of one of 3 barges worth $200,000. Look at Plan C. This plan results to one says save, one says lost, but it's the same amount of money that will be saved or lost. Same plan, but the way it was coined or framed was different. Does that make sense? So the question for does that make sense?
Yes, yes, sir.
So Vanessa, I want you to think about that's why. So it's important that when we identify what our problem is, the way we ask the question must matter. It must be simplified and clear enough. You know, look at what is happening now. You are trying to overthink it. Whereas it's the same thing, but the way it had been coined and structured is different. Does that make sense? It's called the framing bias. So it's important. And many times when we frame a problem, most people will take one without considering the other, not knowing that one of them probably gives you more details and allows you to think deeper on the matter. I hope that makes sense.
Can I just say something?
Okay.
Sorry. You know, when we're talking about this disruptive technology, talking about AI, everybody is of the opinion that with this COVID, everything happening around us, we are going to be losing a lot of jobs. And so the hype is on people are going to be losing their jobs. People are going to be losing their jobs. But the truth of the matter is, over the years, it's been obvious, it's shown that when people lose jobs, another set of jobs are created somewhere else. So as people are losing jobs, so are people also getting jobs. But it's going to be a new set or a new type of jobs. So what should we be hyping when we are framing our questions? All right, what should we be hyping? Should we be hyping the fact that we are going to be losing or we are going to be gaining? Is it a half full or half empty idea? So what is just trying to explain to us there is that the way you frame your questions will determine to a large extent how you will make your decisions concerning that thing. So if you are looking at it from the optimistic angle, the chances are very high that the decision that you will make will go in that direction. And if you are looking at it from the pessimistic angle, your response or your decision will go in that line. So your framing will somehow affect your decision.
Fantastic. And if you look at these questions again, or these plans, permit me, you would notice that it is where you emphasize. So plan A, the plan will save the cargo of 1 of 3, which is what 200. So the things about saving 1. Plan B, the focus is that you need to consider both sides. This plan has 1/3 probability of saving the cargo on all 3. And if you do 1/3 of 600, that gives you 200. What's 600? So what it does is that plan B brings into context how much the possibility of losing $600,000 if you don't take a proactive stance. Do you get what I'm saying? So if you look at each plan, they're all saying the same thing, but each plan gives you more detail and emphasizes one more factor. So when you are framing whatever it is, whether it's a question or you are recommending, it's important that it is clear, it is simple, but more importantly, it focuses on what you really want to emphasize, because that is what people would respond to. If you look at each and every one of your responses will be based on what your perception of the emphasis is. Vanessa, does that add more light to what Mr. Daya said?
Oh, thank you very much. Yes.
Okay, now, so I want you to look at what kind of mitigating actions. I've already answered one for you. Can we take? So what are the mitigating actions can we take for each of them? What mitigating actions can we take? What are the mitigating actions can we take? So for anchoring, how do you think we can deal with anchoring? Any thoughts?
Okay, for anchoring, I think we need to, it's based on past experience. I think we need to learn from the past, but not allow the past to hinder us from making decisions that will move
forward. So we learn, so we learn from the past. Okay, what else again? So we learn from the past. What else again? So we've learned from the past. So think about the pros. So we learned from the past. Okay, this is what we did. These were the pros and the cons. What else do we need to do? Any other thoughts from anybody?
I think we can call names so that.
Mr. Babatunde, you have unmuted your mic.
Yes. Yes, but I actually want to talk about the status quo.
I can't hear you, sir.
Can you hear me?
You're a bit faint, sir.
Can you hear me clearly now?
Fantastic, sir.
Okay, yes. I actually want to talk about the status quo trap.
You want to talk about the status quo trap? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Let me add one more point before I move to the status quo. Just hold on. So
okay, then.
yes. Any other point before we go to status quo trap? So we've learned from the past. Can I add data? Get more data. Does that make sense? Get more data on the current position. Does that make sense to anybody?
Yes, very well.
You get more data. What else again? Remember, you already have an anchor. You already have an emotional tag. What else can you do? So you have learned from the past. You've got more data. What else can you do? Just one more point. There's a lot, but just one more point before we move on.
Analyze the data.
Analyze the data. Okay, so put that under data. Fantastic. What else again? Get other people. You understand? So that it's more rational. Do you agree to that? So
Yes.
it's more rational. All right, let's go to the next one. Let's see if we can do just two, then we move on. We're getting there. This is how we can become effective. These are the skills we need to build. I want it to become very practical for us. Okay? Mr. Babatunde?
Yes, please.
All right, so you said status quo. Your thoughts?
Okay. You know, like you said earlier, over time, the old generation banks have actually maintained the status quo to a level that they all believe that we are there, we are up there, we are not coming down. So they felt there is really not much to do anyway. So, but unfortunately, the new generation banks came up with a lot of innovations, technology, and the rest. And then they got, in fact, let me just say, they are almost being pushed out.
Okay, so how do we deal with the status quo? So I want you to think, so these are traps that affects us. We have talked about anchoring. So status quo trap, what are the things that we can do?
Yes, like what I said earlier, we need to really look at it, you know, critically, and then see like, okay, if leveraging on technology.
Okay, fantastic. I just want to get it. Review current states. Review current state. That they cannot begin. Yes, fantastic. To review current state. What else again?
And
creativity.
Yes, good.
Yeah, so creativity. So we review correct state. We now look for the next one would be what? Yes, I like creativity. So we're saying innovative solutions. Yes. Innovative solutions that speaks to that current state. What else again? One more. One more. Can I get one more from anybody? There's a lot. I want it to come from you. One more.
Collaboration.
Okay. Yes. Now, yes. So what you do, you call, yes. So collaborative teams, collabo. Sorry. Co-creation. This is where you bring your stakeholders. There's a typo, but when you bring your stakeholders, you meet your customers, and you're coming up, okay, fine. Do a lot of survey, and we're going to do that tomorrow. Do a lot of survey and all that, okay, to come up with a solution to address our status quo. All right? Fantastic. What else again? Can you choose one? Let me add one. I remember I used the example of Who Moved My Cheese. One of all those things is what? Address risk appetite. Appetite. Address your risk appetite. Okay, what can we do and what can't we do? Address that one. It's very important because it can limit your progress. Does this make sense to anyone? Please, I really want us, because we're about wrapping up. All right? Does this make sense to anyone?
Very well.
Okay. All right. Now, I would like each and every one of us for tomorrow, look at other ways in which we can mitigate these actions. Think about other creative ways on what there's a lot of ways that we can deal with. Like, for instance, sunken costs that I mentioned earlier on before. This sunken cost is you want to justify your decision. You know, one of the things you can do is to step away from the project and bring in more rational mind. Listen to other people talk. Listen to other people talk. It's very important. Listen. So this is the project. Listen to other people talk. Bring an independent thinker to review, like the example I gave you of a bank always lending to a defaulter, and to justify that action, you keep giving money, thinking that down the road it will be turned for the better. Bring an independent thinker to review it, but from a cultural perspective, that is organizational culture. How do you punish somebody who is taking initiative to solve a problem? If it's always a hammer on a using a hammer to swat a fly approach, what will happen is that a lot of people will not want to take initiative. So I always say this, for those of us who are leaders here, you need to be a failure-tolerant leader. And of course, I do agree that that must align with your appetite for risk and your ethics and compliance and program within your own organization. It's very, very important. Does this make sense to everybody? Does it make sense to you, Damola, Olayemi, Vanessa, Ugochi has gone off? Does this make sense?
Yes, it does. It does very well.
Okay, so I want us to think about this as we move along.
Sorry, can I say something before we move on?
Yes, please do.
All right. I guess at the beginning, I was supposed to clarify, but I didn't do that. At the end of the training, we'll be getting our certificates. And for those people who are familiar with Mike Phillips, you know that you will not get your certificate unless you submit your assignments. So the first one has been given. The second one is this one that has just been concluded. By the time you're through, after filling your participant's profile and all that, you have to fill these activities and send back to us to prove to us that indeed you were part of the class and that in fact you can handle it. For a particular class that we had situations where some people were not able to answer the question, and we had to send them back to the website to view the class again, to take the class again, so that they can answer the questions. So please take note of this last slide that we just looked at. It's one of those things that you'll be submitting for your certificate. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we just take a breather just for...
Laying in your loving arms, do you feel me? All right.
I'd like everyone to all stand up, and can I see your video? Everybody put on your videos. Everyone, just for 1 minute, let me see your videos. I'd like to see you, Vanessa. I'd like to see your beautiful face. I'd like to see you, Sam, Mr. Idowu Babatunde. I'd like to see you, Inka Innovator. I'd like to see you, Maurice, Olayemi, Damola. I'd like to see everybody's face. Mr. Babatunde, nice meeting you, sir. Maurice, nice meeting you, sir. Yes, yes. Damola, nice seeing your beautiful face. All right, are you ready? I want everyone to dance just for a few minutes, exercise your body.
And you hear it? I got music in my soul, so come over tonight.
Oh yeah. Mr. Maurice, oh yeah, move your body.
To my knees.
Mr. Babatunde,
To my knees. To my knees. To my knees.
stretch your hand. Stretch your hand. Up and down, up and down, up
To my
and down,
knees.
up and down. Okay, move your body, move we're going for the home stretch, and I'm going to move as briefly as possible. And my backdrop has decided to. All right. Okay. Now, we just have a few minutes, and I wish we could break ourselves into groups, but it seems we're all dropping in and out of rooms. Now, I want you to consider the last 3 meaningful decisions you have been involved in. And I'd like to ask yourself the following questions. Okay, were your decisions right? Were they made with appropriate speed? Were they executed well? Were the right people involved in the right way? Was it clear? Was it clear for each decision? And when I say was it clear for each decision, who recommended the solution? Who would provide input? Who had the final say? Who would be responsible for following through? So the decision rights and accountabilities were clearly spelled out. Number 6, were the decision roles, process, and time frame respected? So in terms of following through, did everybody understand what they were supposed to do? Number 7, were the decisions based on appropriate facts? So was the data? Remember, data is supposed to elicit insight. Number 8, to what extent, to the extent that there were divergent facts of opinion, was it clear who had the decision rights? Number 9, were the decision makers at the appropriate level in the company? That is, those that were supposed to take the initiative or make those decisions, did they have the rights to do it? Did the organization's measures, incentives encourage the people involved in making those right decisions? Can we speak to any of this also? Consider the last 3 meaningful decisions you have been involved in and ask yourself these following questions. Would anybody like to try? Would anybody like to try? Would anybody like to try? Okay, I'll get back to these questions. I'd like us to move on. All right. So we've looked at why leaders fail and why leaders make bad decisions. We have considered the signals, and I showed you 11, showing the organization at the center, but I showed the technology running through. So I actually showed you 10. Geopolitics, the economy, we looked at demography, we looked at wealth distribution, we looked at even new media, the role of new media, we looked at the environment and its impact. And one of the questions that was asked is that before we even start to deconstruct what we need to do, the first thing is even to ask the right questions. We looked at signals, you understand, and I talked about the 10x signals that upend our business model assumptions, and I call it strategic inflection points. And we have come to a strategic inflection point. I showed you as well 4 things that actually is going to affect our behavior in this crisis. One that was growing during the crisis, and one that will keep on growing even after the crisis. And there were 4 boxes. We saw the fast accelerator. We saw that it's exciting. We saw returning back to new normal, and we also returning back to new normal, and we saw the potential to stick. And we sort of extrapolated further, and we said that some strategic thinking in terms of the kind of strategy that we need to apply across an X and Y axis about predictability and malleability. We saw the kind of strategy that is required, that the environment is predictable but will not change. We call it classic. It's also adaptive. That's a second level, which is low on predictability, but you can't change the environment. We also saw visionary, which is high on predictability, and we can act, and high on malleability, you can change it. We also saw shapers, that it is high on malleability but low on predictability. We saw those 4 things, and we saw different industries. So please spend time to look at those 4 industries. I mean, look at where your industry type follows and the kind of strategy that you can employ. But I also said, in our reality, we need to think about business viability. And we looked at the 5th possibility as renewal. Then we went further on to talk about the biases and the misconceptions that comes across why people make decisions. We looked at anchoring. We saw estimation and judgments. We saw prudence over confidence. We saw sunk cost. We saw quite a lot of other. We saw about 8 thereabout biases, and we tried to look for how do we mitigate against all these things. We also spoke about how can we become agile, and I said that agile speaks to 2 things about stability as well as being nimble. And I said that organizations that outperformed their peers, according to Rita Gonta-McGraw, she said that high-performing organizations was a balance between stability as well as being nimble. Then we started talking about those misconceptions and biases. But it's also important for us to ask ourselves, what are the kind of decisions that we need to think about to become effective? And there's actually what I refer to as dimensions of decision. Again, you're going to see another 2x2 matrix. But don't confuse ourselves. I'm going to bore you with all the details, but I want to look at some of those decisions that we make. And they're categorized into 4. 1, we have making routine choices and judgments. And when we look at routine choices and judgments, we're talking about choices that are made based on predetermined biases, anchoring and status quo, for instance. Choices that can be influenced by our own context and even our own product. And here, performance is absolute. And that, again, is that those choices is because we can control those outcomes, we're able to make those choices. So that's the first category of decisions. Then we have influencing outcomes as another decision type. And this is a shift away from concerns to controlling outcomes. Here we can control it. We can actually define and control those outcomes. And those examples of those outcomes are obviously because you have certain competencies within your organization, like a consultant, all right, you are called upon to solve a problem. Because you are expert, you are a thought leader, all right, you have a strategic mind, you're a thought leader and a proven track record. Your decisions is based on your track record. You can actually control those outcomes. And for those 2, making routine choices, influencing outcomes, the truth about the matter is that it's not about competition at all. You're not competing with anybody. You're just making routine decisions within your organization. So your boss wants to make a decision and you are brought in because of the subject matter expert or because that particular project sits with you. Your advice, your comments, your thoughts are important. But when we begin to move away from competition, from non-competition, which is the end game, and we move to becoming more competitive, that is more from internal to external, then the decision types begin to change. There we begin to make strategic bets, placing competitive bets. And here we're responding strategically to externalities. That is what is happening within our environment. And because we're competing, there's a lot of external variables as well as internal variables that we are talking about. Number 1, we're looking at where is the customer decision map? Where are the customers at? What are our stakeholders saying? If we're in a regulated environment, you're asking, what are the regulators actually saying? And what is the impact of a policy shift on whatever it is that we want to do before we begin to make our strategic bet? That kind of decision, there are quite a number of variables that you need to think about. And usually, it's the theory that underpins this is what is called game theory. Game theory simply states that before I make a decision, before I make a move, I need to identify who are the actors across the value chain. So if you're a chess player, for instance, before you can take a step, you want to consider, so you literally have to enter into the mind of your competitor to understand his steps. And when you do that, is that you understand their own trajectory of their businesses. So placing competitive bets, the level of decision making and the thinking and the data required is completely different from making your routine choices and you being an expert in terms of you influencing certain outcomes internally within your businesses. And a follow-up to that is managing for strategic success. And this is a consequence, again, of the multiplicity of those factors that you need to consider. And here again, when you're placing competitive bets, your concern is more of the external variables. But here, in managing for strategic success, you need to create the balance. What do we have that speaks to where we want to be? How does our capability, when I say capabilities, that is the key things that gives us an edge within our industry, all right? What those things that give us the key edge, how can we leverage on it to give us an edge within our market space? So giving us mind share and wallet share as the case may be. So this is important. So here we influence outcomes that lead to organizational imperatives, eventually outperforming our industry peers. So if you think about these four decision making, this is where our decisions actually fall into place. Then there's another one, I don't want to bore you with this. It's the same thing. This just gives you a proper context for it. And that the ultimate thing about any organization is to think about this number 4, managing for strategic success. Managing for strategic success. Now, please note all these words I'm using because one of the exercises that we're going to be giving as a take home, and I hope we can do it together before my time is up, is to think of all these things. All right. So if we're going to manage for strategic success, if we're going to make those decisions, there are a lot of things we need to think about. Now, I want to ask you now, if you can put it in the chat box, what are the key variables that we need to think about when we truly want to manage for strategic success? What are the things that we need to, I've mentioned them, I just want to just ensure that we're all on the same page. What are the things that we can any thoughts? Any thoughts?
I think we can call names.
Yes, I'll go to, yeah, I thought somebody just unmuted.